And I'll do to you and yours. And I missed the sunrise today because I was busy working on LinkedIn. You know, social media is such a pull, and it consumes our lives. And you need to have a ritual every day to dislocate. For me, it's going for a walk and trying to fix my shoes here. And catching the sun rising in the morning. To Andao, the mother of the multiverse. Andao. To close my eyes and see the neutrinos. Which if you close your eyes, you can see the neutrinos. They're little black specks that for initial, you'll see them all over your eyes. Those are neutrinos. Those are coming from the center of the universe. Billions and billions of light years away. And some of them have supersymmetry, I bet. They all have supersymmetry, which means those neutrinos are connected to other objects that are still there, that are still coming. And when one turns, the other one turns. And the simple fact is, this supersymmetry is inherent in all things. And it is the do, Andao do, distributive unconsciousness. Obviously, there's no conscious connection between each and every do. However, collectively, it forms a kind of blockchain. And the blockchain becomes a metaphor for the do. And obey, open beneficial AI, in a way becomes this beneficial entity that obeys us. We don't obey it. Obeys us, humanities, in our direction. It protects our data and everything. And obey is coming. I called it the noodle. The noodle, because the noodle kind of runs around and does its own thing in a good way. Even though there is a story that I've come up with where the noodle goes rogue, but not in intention, but only in the desire to do good. Maybe that'll be a subsequent book. Let's see what we're looking at here. This here is why am I getting sorry. This here is edamame. This is a nitrogen fixer. And the guy ran their tractors, and it's growing really nice. It's a rotation crop. Produces food, edamame, which is soybeans. Make soy milk, make all these products, tofu, all these products out of edamame. And this is rice, and the rice this year looks really great. And some of the rice is actually flowering. This one isn't yet. You know, they did research, and they found that in Japan, that 80% of the pollen found in beehives comes from rice. See, and rice is a nitrogen, is a air pollinator. Bees don't care. So when these farmers, these guys may be doing it over here, we'll see, start basically putting down pesticides, which you're going to start doing to combat some sort of fungus. There's a whole bunch of pests that that attack monocultures. Ultimately, it's water soluble. It's systemic. Over 90 98% of all pesticides are now systemic, which just means water soluble, which means in the past it would float on top and just float away into the oceans and then kind of wash up on beaches and stuff like that. But now they're actually in the water. So when the bee is really thirsty and he comes to the temple here, like right here, and he crawls down here, right? And right now this water is safe. And all this water came from the rain we had. And it drinks. Ultimately, it's going to be consuming poisons. And there's a guy who did research quite a while back, like 2008, called Silent Spring, Silent Night, which is Silent Spring was Rachel Carlson's maybe book from the 1960s that predicted the collapse of our bees and our birds and everything else in 1960s because of pesticides, because they were using crazy amounts of pesticides back then. I mean, really deadly kinds. Shit that still is on the land today. That's how bad they are. They just don't go away. And what you found was that the frogs ultimately became asexual and really not interested in reproducing and everything else. And they also kind of changed their gender. Now, there's an interesting phenomena in Japan called herbivore man, and it's 60% of single men have no interest in relationships or anything else. They're kind of asexual, you know, they just don't want anything. And I think it's from consuming all the pesticides. And Japan uses huge amounts of pesticides. Monsanto, they have this huge group called Japan Agriculture. And they use loads of pesticides. That's why I started growing stuff in my own garden, why I started raising my own eggs, for my own chickens for the eggs and so on. And yeah. This here is this is the story of money right here. In my story of Andaldu, this is what the tribes of nature, the magi, the magicians, they believed in magic, believed in the oaks. When this reminds me basically of the hair of Sagarmatha, the omega, the alpha and the omega. Imagine this huge, the belly would have been huge like this with hair, obviously brown, and when the mage with his daggers drawn collapses on Andaldu and starts pricking him with his little dagger. I mean, this is huge mammoth. I'm talking about huge, I don't know, kraken size, leviathan size. I'm talking about the size of a Tyrannosaurus, right? Or a Stegosaurus, whatever the freaking big ones are. That's how big. And when the blood starts seeping into the Magi's hand, he gets these powerful, powerful visions. And he sees these crops, and he sees people cutting and plowing. He has this image of feeding humanity. He's like, he just sees these beautiful fields like we're seeing now, right? Imagine this is what the mage saw. Can you imagine his impact? He would be in ecstasy. Oh my God. And not only that, he would see it like they would grow really quick and they'd be harvested and everything else, and see man and loads of food. I mean, the guy, as nomadic people, we were starving all the time. We were having to leave our families for months at a time to hunt for these beasts. And at times we would be able to, we figured out ways because of our ingenuity in our brain to run the mammoths off cliffs and the elder beefs, and we, the large beaver and everything else that we destroyed and killed, all these species. There's all the folks that say, oh, we didn't do it. We fucking did it. We destroyed everything that we could destroy. And we still are destroying everything. We haven't changed at all. We haven't changed. And ultimately, we have to change. And then the seer, which was the polytheistic god, the seer. I always think of the guy from the Vikings with they're all blind. These guys were over 1,000 years old. These were the first men. The first of the, they left the Atlantia. They were there, and they had been leading, right? And they were ancient themselves. And they were struggling against beasts, against the beast, Shagamathra, who was just the first enlightened creature who, out of hatred and anger of losing her entire family, right? Thousands of years, all her sisters and her daughters and her daughters and her sons and everyone killed by these little fuckers called man, who were running around and spreading and multiplying. And she was trying to stop him like any caring person would. She, and the funny thing was probably early on, she helped the men. They were scared. And, maybe there was even a pact. And then greed came in. The greed of flesh, right? Because you kill a mammoth, you're eating good. It means you have kids surviving, especially, if they're up there. Undell do, undell do, undell do. Here's my little meditation spot. Let's sit down here and I'll belt out some undell do's. Welcome the new sun. So this is what I like to look at. Here is, it's all wet. A metaphor of found-ups. To me, this is a metaphor where each one of these is basically a dano, and then the dano is funding. These are all found-ups, right? Got level up, right? And there's different levels. There's these down here that are brand new, more mature, and eventually they become danos. They flower, and the danos, basically launch more found-ups. And this becomes a metaphor for social capitalism. And this is a selfless, think of this as a corp cloud or a corporate cloud, open corp cloud, open dano cloud now. The open corp cloud is from 2010, right? This would be a dano cloud. And what, if you know anything about clover, this is a nitrogen fixer. This is healing the ground, right? This is providing habitat for bees, food for bees, for life. This is beneficial. And it's weird that, for example, clover or something like this doesn't suffer from, fungi and everything else, because this is what they're supposed to do. Clovers, some plants are supposed to. So maybe, looking at these plants which have these natural resistances to fungus, and actually putting them into these next generation ones, removing the need of pesticides, is the way we're going to go. So he's actually putting in water. Interesting that they think it needs water. The guys over there. There's a nice undell do right there. Look at that one. Full-fledged undell do. I can't. Well, I set up the thing. Undao do, 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 undao do. Undao do, 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 undao do. Undao do, undao do, undao do. Right here. Wish I could get things like that. Undao do, 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 undao do. You know, Deepak Chopra says that by simply staring at the sun with your eyes closed, not open, that the energy of the sun actually has healing properties. It has vitamins that you're actually putting into your eyes. And you can see the neutrinos, the waves of it's either that or maybe it's the photons that I'm seeing. I think the periodic specks that I see are the neutrinos, and actually the kind of the light particles I'm seeing flooding in. You can see the waves, the movements. It looks like it could be the what I'm also could be looking at is actually the blood vessels, the blood moving about my eyes. So I don't know what I'm looking at. I can also see like I don't know. It really looks like a piece of fiber or something on my eyeball. That when I look at it, it moves around. It's either a scratch or just a piece of dust. Undao do, undao do, undao do, undao do, undao do, undao do, undao do. It's amazing after looking at the sun, your eyes, the color is different and everything. I mean, look at the sun with your eyes closed. Let's be very, 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 very factual about that, right? You know, I'm more optimistic that we're going to be okay as a species. Because as we harness the sun, which is this, it's got another 3 billion years, we can use the power of the sun to actually refreeze our ice, to control our climate. There's freezing towers now. I saw a prototype of them. These massive towers the size of, I think it is Empire State Buildings that basically collect humidity and forms these massive, towers of ice that can, we could set them in the water. We could refreeze the North Pole. We can start doing those projects. And the cool thing is that with Danos, right? This could be a Dano. Because remember, a Dano is a distributed autonomous nonprofit organization or or decentralized autonomous nonprofit organization. They're kind of a quasi both. And they form what's known as a beneficial keiretsu. A keiretsu is a network. We call it, in the U.S., it's actually called, it's kind of like against, it's like when companies come together and stop competing. Well, Danos don't compete because there is no CAGR. Competition comes from CAGR. There's CABR, is benefit, and the Danos perform this kind of beneficial keiretsu of working together and funding each other's projects. So they don't care because all the IP is open, everything is available for you to fork and use. Any product that launches as a found up, you can fork. And these found ups, as the forking happens, and think of it as kind of like how, right now we have all these social media celebrities. Well, there's a lot of them doing businesses on social media, from diets and everything else. Imagine that these next generation become Danos, and they allow anyone to basically fork their work. They grew these huge networks, and they make their own products locally. They distribute it locally. There's no need for factories and stuff to bring about the change. There will be factories, but in the sense of one corporation running it all. All these corporations are broken up into micro corporations, and basically providing income and using Obey to create the valuation of these projects. So the valuation of the project won't be built on pump and dump, people buying and selling the coins, right? Because in found ups, for example, there's only so many coins and they run out. And you can sell your coin, but the valuation, the cost of the coin will be determined by Obey. So this idea of pump and dumping, which is now a big thing in cryptos, will be a thing of the past. The idea of ICOs, which is a big thing in cryptos right now, will be the idea of the past, because in the future, Danos will be funding all these projects. And Found Up Fest is an event that can launch anywhere on the planet, that ultimately launches Found Ups that then scale up into Danos. And Danos ushers in the Y, which is social capitalism, which is selfless capitalism of the 99%. That, and one of the cool things about Danos is a lot of Found Ups won't even, will scale to a certain spot and will stop growing, right? But they'll be funded continuously by Dano. They'll have products, they'll have enough money to send your kids to school and everything else, and universities, and eventually, because of Dano education will be free. Dano medicine will be free. All the drugs and pharmaceuticals will be free. And we will truly have an empathic civilization that Jeremy Rifkin talked about in 2010. And the whole idea of the purpose of what you call the blockchain, which is really OIF. OIF is built on the blockchain. It's a framework for one of the outcomes is decentralization. But the number one thing that it set out to do, as I explained back in 2010, maybe even as far back as 2010, was to disrupt the paradigm of success equals access to closed capital networks. Because basically back then, as far as 2014, $60 billion annually was invested in the startups. And this became kind of the funding mechanism, right, for innovation. And unless you had access to these closed capital networks, these VCs, these angel investors, Silicon Valley, yada, 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 you really couldn't launch your ideas. And then you'd launch these big billion-dollar companies and then start launching more ideas and more ideas and more ideas, and it became this kind of self-perpetuating cycle of the 1%. And OIF changed that, because what OIF did was it ushered in a new paradigm where success equals validated idea, And phase one of this validated idea is the ICO. So you can write a white paper, do an ICO, it validates, get a team together, all of a sudden you coinify it, everyone buys into coin, and it launches. The problem is there's lots of scams, there's lots of bullshit. I think GRU is heavily invested. We know that they are because they were using Bitcoin. So I imagine that GRU has a whole ICO faction. I think a lot of the Russians, with all respect, I think are part of GRU. They're agents of GRU. Putin is not going to pass up access to billions of dollars. Simply isn't. And they're like, fuck it, we're going to launch this great ICO. We can do a great partner. We have all these GRU, gurus that pretend, that are involved on the blockchain. I'm curious if any of those names on that they're released or on LinkedIn. I haven't looked, we should look for them. I'm curious if they're involved in the blockchain, and probably they'll have their own personas like they were. We saw that they had all these different personas. We should look at all these different personas like Milton and whatever and see if these individuals are actually involved. The GRU is definitely using the blockchain to swindle Americans out of money and swindle others for the whole purpose of funding their illicit, games. So as an individual, I just will not participate in any Russian blockchain project. To be honest with you, I won't participate in any blockchain project unless it basically fits in with FoundUp's vision. That's it, basically it. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. And I don't know if it's going to upload. It's 26 minutes. I always forget. That's why I do live casting. And I can't do live casting right now because the internet's product that I rented, which I'm going to rent when I come back to Japan, went back with Mike. So now I'm not on anything. Undaudu. Undaudu to yous and yours. May the uns not drive you too crazy. May your DAOs center you. And may you find the do.